Amaral has the right to publish the book because he haven't said any lie, and he haven't offended the personality of the McCanns or the Madeleine McCann or the children, because what he says lies in the criminal case. Okay, he have the fundamentum, all fundamentals that he says are in the criminal case.
So,
you said that the night before, Madeleine and Sean had been very upset, and
I didn't say that actually.
What, that was in the statement, wasn't it? That was leaked out. Was that not the case? Was she not upset the night before and talked to you the night before?
Gonçalo, good show. Good look. Good look, my friend. Are you pretty confident?
Forward a little bit, guys. Okay. Right, there we are. Thank you.
To your right here, please.
Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her. Those panicked words, screamed by Kate McCann at 10 p.m. on May 3, 2007, would trigger one of the most publicized missing person cases in history. Within hours, the world knew the name Madeleine McCann, the 3-year-old British girl who vanished from her family's vacation apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, while her parents dined with friends just 180 feet away. The image became iconic. A blonde child with a distinctive dark mark in her right eye, her face plastered across newspapers, websites, and television screens worldwide. For years, we've heard the heartbreaking story of parents desperately searching for their kidnapped daughter, facing unimaginable grief while maintaining hope she might someday return. But what if everything you thought you knew about this famous disappearance was wrong? What if the lead detective assigned to the case, the man with access to all the evidence, witness statements, and forensic reports, came to believe something entirely different happened that night? Today, we're diving into the explosive allegations made by Gonçalo Amaral, the Portuguese detective who led the initial investigation into Madeleine's disappearance. His claims sent shockwaves through the case and ignited a bitter, years-long legal battle with Kate and Gerry McCann. Amaral didn't just question parts of the McCanns' story. He published a book titled The Truth of the Lie, directly accusing them of involvement in their daughter's disappearance and an elaborate cover-up. He alleged that Madeleine died accidentally in that holiday apartment and that her parents staged an abduction to conceal what really happened. These weren't baseless claims from some internet conspiracy theorist. They came from the senior detective who spent months examining the evidence firsthand. The same detective who was suddenly removed from the case after criticizing British police involvement. The same detective who later won multiple court battles against the McCanns when they tried to silence him. Before we go further, I want to be absolutely clear. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann remains officially unsolved. No one has been convicted of any crime related to her vanishing. What I'm presenting today are the documented claims, evidence and court rulings surrounding Amaral's controversial allegations. Allegations that many people have never heard in full. If you're new to Criminal Instinct, welcome. We dive deep into complex cases, examining evidence that mainstream coverage often overlooks. If you appreciate thorough, unfiltered, true crime analysis, take a second right now to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. It helps our channel reach more viewers who value this kind of content, and you'll be notified when we release new investigations. In the next hour, we'll examine the specific claims Amaral made against the McCanns, the evidence he cited to support his theory, and the extraordinary legal battles that followed. We'll look at why Portuguese courts ultimately ruled in Amaral's favor, allowing his accusations to stand despite the McCanns' attempts to ban his book. We'll also explore the current status of the investigation, including the German suspect Christian Bruckner, and how Amaral's allegations continue to divide public opinion nearly 2 decades after that fateful night in Portugal. The story of Madeleine McCann isn't just about a missing child. It's about power, influence, media manipulation, and the complex question of who gets to control the narrative when tragedy strikes. So let's begin where it all started, in a holiday apartment in the Algarve, where a family's vacation would transform into a mystery that continues to haunt us to this day. The Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, sits just a short walk from the beach, a picturesque vacation spot popular with British tourists. In late April 2007, Kate and Gerry McCann arrived there with their 3 children, 2-year-old twins Sean and Amelie, and 3-year-old Madeleine. They were joined by 7 friends, later dubbed the Tapas 7 by the media: David and Fiona Payne, Russell O'Brien and Jane Tanner, Matthew and Rachel Oldfield, and Diane Webster. The group established a routine during their stay. Each evening, they would put their children to bed in their respective apartments, then meet for dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant. The adults would take turns checking on the sleeping children throughout the evening, an arrangement they later described as similar to dining in your backyard while your children sleep inside. On the night of May 3rd, the group gathered for dinner around 8:30 p.m. According to their statements, Gerry McCann checked on the children at 9:05 p.m. and found everything normal. At approximately 9:25 p.m., Matthew Oldfield entered the McCann's apartment, but only listened at the children's bedroom door without actually seeing Madeleine. At 10 p.m., Kate McCann went to check and discovered Madeleine's bed empty. What happened next set in motion a chain of events that would captivate the world. Kate immediately raised the alarm, claiming Madeleine had been abducted. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, though the McCanns insisted a window in the children's bedroom had been opened. Within minutes, resort staff and guests began searching the grounds. Portuguese police arrived around 11:01 p.m., but crucial early investigative steps were compromised. The apartment wasn't properly secured as a crime scene, allowing dozens of people to move through it, potentially contaminating evidence. Kate and Gerry McCann were both medical professionals from Rothley, Leicestershire. Gerry, a cardiologist, and Kate, a general practitioner who had worked part-time since having children, were described by friends as devoted parents. In the days following Madeleine's disappearance, they demonstrated remarkable media savvy, quickly establishing a campaign to find their daughter that would gain international attention. The initial Portuguese investigation, led by Gonçalo Amaral, focused on the possibility of abduction. Border alerts were issued, though with a critical delay of several hours. Roadblocks weren't established until the following morning. Early suspects included Robert Murat, a British-Portuguese property consultant who lived nearby and had inserted himself into the investigation as a translator. Murat was later cleared of any involvement and received substantial libel damages from British newspapers. As days passed without significant leads, the investigation began to shift. Portuguese police, operating under different protocols than their British counterparts, became increasingly suspicious of the parents, a common investigative approach in missing child cases. This suspicion intensified when British cadaver dogs were brought in and allegedly alerted to the scent of human remains in the McCann's apartment and rental car, though the car was rented 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. The media coverage was unprecedented. Within days, Madeleine's face appeared on front pages worldwide. The McCanns launched a sophisticated public relations campaign, meeting with the Pope, traveling across Europe with Madeleine's favorite stuffed animal, Cuddle Cat, and establishing a fighting fund that would raise millions of pounds. Celebrities including David Beckham, J.K. Rowling, and Richard Branson made public appeals or financial contributions to the search. This media blitz created both opportunities and complications. While it kept Madeleine's case in the public eye, it also put enormous pressure on investigators. Portuguese authorities, unused to such intense scrutiny, found themselves criticized for what British tabloids characterized as a slow, incompetent response. This international tension would later play a significant role in Amaral's allegations about British interference in the investigation. By September 2007, the case took a dramatic turn when Portuguese police formally named Kate and Gerry McCann as arguidos, official suspects. British tabloids, which had been sympathetic to the McCanns, pivoted to publishing increasingly sensational allegations against them. The couple returned to the UK, where they would later successfully sue several newspapers for libel, receiving substantial damages. It's a case that captured global attention like few others. I'm curious, where were you when you first heard about Madeleine's disappearance? Do you remember your initial reaction to the news? Drop a comment below sharing your memory of when this case first broke. It's fascinating to see how a single event connected people across different countries and continents. As the investigation continued into late 2007, the relationship between Portuguese authorities and the McCanns deteriorated further. In October, Gonçalo Amaral was removed from the case after criticizing British police in a newspaper interview. This removal would mark the beginning of his transformation from lead investigator to the McCanns' most prominent accuser, a transformation that would expose the deep divisions in how different people interpreted the evidence in this baffling case. Gonçalo Amaral wasn't just any detective when he was assigned to lead the Madeleine McCann investigation. At 47 years old, he was a veteran of Portugal's Polícia Judiciária with 27 years of experience, serving as the coordinator of the Criminal Investigation Department in Portimão. Stocky, with a distinctive moustache and often photographed with a cigarette, Amaral cut a figure that British tabloids would later caricature as an incompetent provincial policeman out of his depth. The reality was more complex. Amaral had handled numerous high-profile cases throughout his career, though not without controversy. Most notably, he had been involved in the investigation of another missing child case, that of 8-year-old Joana Cipriano, who disappeared from a village 7 miles from Praia da Luz in 2004. That case ended with the conviction of Joana's mother and uncle for murder, but it also led to allegations of police misconduct. In 2009, Amaral would receive an 18-month suspended sentence for falsifying documents related to the Cipriano case, though he maintained his innocence and claimed he was being scapegoated. This background would later be used by the McCanns and their supporters to discredit Amaral's work on the Madeleine case. However, when he took charge of the investigation on May 3, 2007, none of these controversies had yet surfaced in the international media. Amaral's initial approach followed standard Portuguese investigative procedure. Unlike the UK, where missing children are typically treated as abductions until proven otherwise, Portuguese protocol considered multiple possibilities from the outset. Still, the early investigation focused primarily on the abduction theory, with officers conducting door-to-door inquiries, searching nearby areas, and checking border crossings. According to Amaral's later accounts, his perspective began to shift within the first week. Several elements troubled him: the lack of forced entry to the apartment, inconsistencies in witness statements from the Tapas 7, and what he perceived as unusual behavior from the McCanns. He was particularly struck by their media campaign, which he felt was unprecedented for parents of a missing child in the crucial early days of an investigation. The investigation took a significant turn in late July 2007 when British police brought specialized cadaver dogs to Portugal. These weren't ordinary police dogs. They were specifically trained to detect the scent of human remains, cadaver dog, and human blood, blood detection dog. The dogs were handled by Martin Grime, a respected expert with years of experience. What happened next would become central to Amaral's theory. The cadaver dog allegedly alerted in multiple locations in apartment 5A, particularly in the McCann's bedroom and in a corner of the living room behind the sofa. The blood detection dog also indicated the presence of blood in some of the same locations. More controversially, both dogs later alerted when examining a Renault Scenic that the McCanns had rented 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. Forensic samples were collected from these locations and sent to the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham, England. The results were inconclusive. Traces of DNA were found that could potentially match Madeleine's profile, but the samples were degraded and insufficient for a definitive identification. The FSS report stated that while there was a match with 15 out of 19 DNA markers, this wasn't enough to conclusively identify the DNA as Madeleine's. For Amaral, however, the dog's alerts were significant. In his view, these highly trained animals had detected evidence that something tragic had occurred in the apartment. Combined with what he saw as inconsistencies in the McCann's account, this led him to develop an alternative theory: that Madeleine had died accidentally in the apartment, and her parents had concealed her body and fabricated the abduction story. Other elements fueled Amaral's suspicions. He noted that despite the McCanns' claim that they checked on their children regularly, none of the other diners at the tapas restaurant recalled them leaving the table frequently. He questioned why Kate, upon discovering Madeleine missing, had left the twins alone in the apartment while she ran to raise the alarm. He was troubled by reports that the McCanns had washed Cuddle Cat, Madeleine's favorite toy that Kate carried everywhere after the disappearance, potentially destroying evidence. By August 2007, Portuguese authorities had formally shifted their investigation toward the possibility of Madeleine's death in the apartment. On September 7th, after intense questioning, Kate and Jerry McCann were named as arguidos, formal suspects. This status didn't equate to charges, but indicated they were under official suspicion. Just weeks later, on October 2nd, 2007, Amaral was removed from the case. The official reason given was his criticism of British police in a newspaper interview, where he suggested they were too focused on leads provided by the McCanns. Many observers, including Amaral himself, believed his removal was politically motivated, the result of diplomatic pressure from the UK, where the McCanns had high-profile supporters, including politicians and celebrities. Amaral's removal marked a turning point. The investigation continued under new leadership, but by July 2008, Portuguese authorities archived the case due to insufficient evidence. The McCanns' arguido status was lifted, as was that of Robert Murat. No charges were filed against anyone. On the day the case was archived, Amaral retired from the police force and announced his intention to publish a book. Free from the constraints of his position, he was determined to share his theory with the public. That book, A Verdade da Mentira, or The Truth of the Lie, would become the centerpiece of a bitter, years-long legal battle. Before we dive into the explosive allegations in Amaral's book and the legal firestorm it ignited, I want to take a moment to thank you for sticking with this complex case. At Criminal Instinct, we believe in examining every angle of these mysterious disappearances, not just the narratives that made headlines. If you're finding value in this deeper analysis, now is the perfect time to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Our channel is dedicated to uncovering the layers of famous cases that mainstream coverage often glosses over. We spend weeks researching each topic to bring you the most comprehensive, fact-based presentations possible. Your subscription helps us continue this work and ensures you won't miss our upcoming investigations into other controversial cases. Now, let's examine the bombshell claims Amaral made in his book. Allegations so controversial that the McCanns would spend over £1 million and nearly a decade trying to suppress them. If you're fascinated by the alternative theories in the Madeleine McCann case, you'll want to check out our exclusive ebook, Beyond the Headlines, The Untold Theories of the Madeleine McCann Disappearance. This comprehensive guide examines Amaral's claims in detail, alongside other theories that received minimal mainstream coverage. The ebook includes analysis from criminal psychologists, forensic experts, and investigative journalists who've studied the case for years. Unlike sensationalized tabloid coverage, our ebook presents the evidence behind each theory, allowing you to form your own conclusions about what really happened that night in Praia da Luz. Visit the link in the description to download your copy today and discover the perspectives that powerful interests tried to keep from public view. Tone returns to serious narrative. On July 24, 2008, just 3 days after the Portuguese investigation was officially archived, Gonçalo Amaral published A Verdade da Mentira, The Truth of the Lie. The timing was deliberate. With the case closed and his police career behind him, Amaral was free to present his theory without institutional constraints. The book became an immediate sensation in Portugal, selling an estimated 120,000 copies in its first few months. It was quickly translated into multiple languages, including Spanish, German, Dutch, and French, though notably no official English translation was ever published due to the legal challenges that followed. The Truth of the Lie presented a narrative radically different from the abduction theory that dominated British media. Amaral's central claim was stark. Madeleine McCann died accidentally in apartment 5A on the evening of May 3, 2007. According to his theory, the McCanns discovered her death, possibly after she fell while trying to look for her parents, and then concealed her body to avoid potential negligence charges for leaving the children alone. Amaral's book detailed specific allegations. First, he claimed the cadaver and blood dogs alerts provided scientific evidence that a death occurred in the apartment and that Madeleine's body was later transported in the rental car. Second, he pointed to what he called inconsistencies in the timeline provided by the McCanns and their friends, suggesting their statements had been coordinated to support the abduction narrative. Third, he alleged that the window the McCanns claimed was used by the abductor showed no forensic evidence of being forced open and was likely staged after the fact. Fourth, he suggested that the McCanns received unprecedented support from British authorities, including direct intervention from diplomats and politicians, which he interpreted as interference in the Portuguese investigation. The book concluded with Amaral's belief that Madeleine's body was initially hidden somewhere near the apartment, then later moved to a more permanent location using the rental car, explaining why the dogs alerted to the vehicle rented weeks after her disappearance. In April 2009, a documentary based on the book aired on Portuguese television, further spreading Amaral's claims. By this point, the book had sold over 200,000 copies and generated significant revenue for its author. Public reaction to Amaral's allegations split largely along national lines. In Portugal, many viewed his theory as credible, based on legitimate evidence that had been overshadowed by the McCanns' media campaign. A Portuguese newspaper poll at the time showed that over 70% of respondents believed Amaral's version of events. In Britain, however, the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. British tabloids, which had initially turned against the McCanns but later reversed course after libel settlements, portrayed Amaral as an incompetent, vindictive ex-policeman exploiting a tragedy for profit. The McCanns themselves called the book a disgraceful attempt to cash in on our agony and vowed to fight its publication. This national divide reflected deeper cultural differences in how the case was perceived. Many Portuguese citizens resented what they saw as British arrogance and media manipulation, while British observers often viewed the Portuguese investigation as backward and unprofessional. The stage was now set for an extraordinary legal battle that would last nearly a decade, cost millions in legal fees, and ultimately reach the European Court of Human Rights. The McCanns' legal counter-offensive began in earnest in May 2009 when they filed a lawsuit in Lisbon against Gonçalo Amaral, his publisher Guerra Paz, the video production company Valentim de Carvalho, and TVI, the television channel that aired the documentary based on his book. Their goal was ambitious: to ban The Truth of the Lie from circulation, prevent any further editions or translations, and secure substantial damages for alleged defamation. This marked the beginning of a complex legal saga that would wind through multiple Portuguese courts and ultimately reach the European Court of Human Rights. The case would test the boundaries between freedom of expression and the right to reputation, setting important precedents for similar cases across Europe. The McCanns' initial victory came on September 9, 2009, when the Lisbon Civil Court granted a preliminary injunction ordering the seizure of all copies of Amaral's book from bookstores and prohibiting further sales or publications. The court also banned the documentary and any statements by Amaral repeating his allegations. Judge Gabriela Cunha Rodrigues ruled that the book and documentary caused significant ongoing damage to the McCanns and their search for Madeleine. For Amaral, this ruling was financially devastating. The injunction froze his assets, including property and bank accounts, leaving him unable to pay legal fees or support his family. He was forced to rely on public donations for his defense. Despite these hardships, he remained defiant, insisting that his right to express his professional opinion was being unlawfully suppressed. The injunction was short-lived. On October 19, 2010, the Lisbon Court of Appeal overturned the ban, ruling that it violated Amaral's freedom of expression. The court emphasized that his book was based on information that had already been made public in the police files, which had been released to the media when the case was archived. The judges also noted that the McCanns had themselves publicized the case extensively, making it a matter of legitimate public debate. This reversal allowed The Truth of the Lie to return to bookstores, where it continued to sell well. However, The main defamation case was still proceeding separately from the injunction battle. The next major development came on April 28, 2015, when the Lisbon Civil Court ruled in favor of the McCanns in the main lawsuit, ordering Amaral to pay $500,000, approximately $394,000, in damages. The court found that his book and statements had caused the couple significant emotional distress and damaged their reputation. Additionally, Amaral was ordered to pay interest and prohibited from authorizing new editions of his book. This victory for the McCanns proved equally temporary. On April 19, 2016, the Lisbon Court of Appeal once again reversed the lower court's decision, completely rejecting the McCanns' claims. The appellate judges ruled that Amaral's right to freedom of expression outweighed the McCanns' right to reputation, particularly given their status as public figures involved in a matter of public interest. The court also noted that the McCanns had not proven that Amaral's book had hindered the search for Madeleine or caused them verifiable damages. Determined to silence Amaral, the McCanns appealed to Portugal's Supreme Court of Justice, the highest court in the country for civil matters. On January 31, 2017, the Supreme Court delivered its final verdict, upholding the Court of Appeal's decision and definitively rejecting the McCanns' claims. The Supreme Court's ruling was particularly significant for its reasoning. The judges stated that Amaral's book was protected under freedom of expression principles and that his theory was based on legitimate interpretation of evidence from the official investigation. More controversially, the court noted that the McCanns had not been cleared of involvement in their daughter's disappearance. Rather, the investigation had been archived due to insufficient evidence. The ruling stated, "It should not be said that the appellants were cleared by the archiving of the criminal case. They were not defendants, so they could not be formally acquitted." This statement from Portugal's highest court caused outrage in British media, which characterized it as an attack on the McCanns. However, legal experts noted that the court was simply making a technical distinction between having charges dropped, which never happened since charges were never filed, and being formally cleared of suspicion, which would require a trial verdict. Having exhausted all legal remedies in Portugal, the McCanns took their case to the European Court of Human Rights, ECTHR, in Strasbourg. On September 20, 2022, the ECTHR unanimously found no violation of the McCanns' rights under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, right to respect for private and family life. The court agreed with the Portuguese Supreme Court's reasoning, affirming that Amaral's statements were protected under Article 10, freedom of expression, and were part of a legitimate public debate. This ruling effectively ended the McCanns' decade-long legal battle to suppress Amaral's book and claims. Throughout this period, they had spent an estimated $1 million on legal fees, much of it coming from the fund established to search for Madeleine. Amaral, meanwhile, had continued to publish, releasing a second book titled A Mordaça Inglesa, The English Gag, in 2009, focusing on his experiences with what he perceived as censorship. The court's consistent rulings in favor of Amaral's right to express his theory raise profound questions about freedom of speech, public interest, and the power of wealth and influence to shape narratives. I'm curious, what do you think about these court decisions? Do you believe the Portuguese courts and the European Court of Human Rights made the right call in allowing Amaral's book to remain in circulation? Or do you think the McCanns deserved more protection from these allegations? This isn't just about one missing child case. It's about who controls information in high-profile investigations and whether alternative theories should be suppressed or debated openly. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The discussion around this case remains as relevant today as it was when Madeleine first disappeared. While the legal battles over Amaral's book were playing out, the investigation into Madeleine's disappearance continued on multiple fronts, with new suspects emerging and alternative theories gaining traction. While Amaral's theory dominated headlines due to the legal battles it sparked, investigators and armchair detectives alike have proposed numerous alternative explanations for Madeleine's disappearance. These range from plausible investigative leads to far-fetched conspiracy theories, creating a complex web of possibilities that continues to evolve nearly 2 decades after that fateful night. One persistent theory focuses on a potential targeted abduction by a trafficking ring. Supporters of this theory point to Madeleine's distinctive right eye, with its unusual coloboma creating a dark mark in her iris, as making her identifiable and potentially valuable to traffickers. Critics counter that such a distinctive feature would actually make her too recognizable to be trafficked successfully. Another theory suggests a burglary gone wrong, that thieves broke into the apartment, were surprised by Madeleine waking up, and took her to prevent identification. Portuguese police did investigate a series of break-ins at the Ocean Club resort in the weeks before Madeleine's disappearance, though none involved abductions. Some investigators have focused on reported sightings of a man carrying a child near the McCann apartment around the time of the disappearance. Jane Tanner, one of the Tapas 7, reported seeing such a man at approximately 9:15 p.m. Years later, in 2013, Scotland Yard identified this man as an innocent British tourist carrying his own child back from the resort's night creche, though this identification came 6 years after the fact and has been questioned by some observers. Another significant sighting came from the Smith family, Irish tourists, who reported seeing a man carrying a pajama-clad child toward the beach around 10:01 p.m. Initially, Martin Smith stated that when he later saw footage of Jerry McCann carrying one of the twins off an airplane, he was 60–80% certain it was the same man he saw that night. He later distanced himself from this identification. The most significant development in recent years has been the identification of Christian Bruckner as the prime suspect by German prosecutors. Bruckner, a German national with a history of sexual offences against both adults and children, was living in the Algarve at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. His cell phone records place him in Praia da Luz on the evening of May 3, 2007, and he reportedly confessed to a friend that he knew all about Madeleine's case. In June 2020, German prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters publicly identified Bruckner as their main suspect and stated they were investigating the case as a murder inquiry, believing Madeleine to be dead. However, despite this confidence, formal charges related to Madeleine's disappearance have not been filed against Bruckner as of late 2024. Bruckner is currently serving a 7-year prison sentence in Germany for the rape of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz in 2005, a crime that occurred in the same area where Madeleine would disappear 2 years later. German authorities have indicated he is set to be released by September 2025, though this may be delayed to early 2026 if he fails to pay a fine related to another conviction. In May 2023, Portuguese and German police conducted a search at the Areia Dam, approximately 30 miles from Praia da Luz. This location was reportedly frequented by Bruckner during his time in Portugal. The search yielded some items of interest, though authorities have not disclosed their nature or significance to the investigation. Operation Grange, the Metropolitan Police's investigation into Madeleine's disappearance, continues to receive funding from the UK Home Office, with the latest approval of $108,000 for 2025-2026. This brings the total cost of the British investigation to over $13.2 million since its launch in 2011. Despite this substantial investment, no arrests have been made, and Madeleine's fate remains unknown. The ongoing case has left a profound impact on all parties involved. Kate and Jerry McCann continue to maintain a public presence through the official Find Madeleine campaign, though with decreasing frequency as years pass. They have raised their twins, Sean and Amelie, now teenagers, while living under the shadow of both their daughter's disappearance and the persistent allegations against them. Gonçalo Amaral, despite his legal victories, has faced professional and personal consequences for his public stance. His police career ended, his marriage dissolved, and he became a polarizing figure in Portuguese society, viewed as either a truth-teller standing up to powerful interests or a disgraced officer exploiting a tragedy. The Tapas 7 have largely retreated from public view, though several provided statements to Operation Grange as the investigation continued. Robert Murat, initially suspected and later cleared, received substantial libel damages from British newspapers, but has spoken about the lasting damage to his reputation. The Madeleine McCann case continues to evolve, with new evidence and perspectives emerging even after all these years. If you found this deep dive valuable, please take a moment to subscribe to Criminal Instinct and hit that notification bell. Share this video with anyone interested in understanding the full complexity of this case beyond the headlines. Next week, we'll be examining another controversial case where official narratives have been challenged by insiders: the mysterious death of Jeffrey Epstein and the conflicting evidence surrounding it. You won't want to miss our analysis of the surveillance footage discrepancies and medical examiner disputes. Subscribe now to ensure you don't miss it. As we conclude our examination of Amaral's bombshell accusations, let's reflect on what this case reveals about truth, media influence, and the complex nature of high-profile investigations. The Madeleine McCann case stands as a watershed moment in how missing children cases are investigated, reported, and perceived by the public. Nearly 2 decades later, it continues to reveal uncomfortable truths about the intersection of wealth, media influence, international politics, and justice. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this case is how dramatically different narratives emerge depending on one's location. In Britain, the McCanns were predominantly portrayed as victims, first of a heinous crime, then of an incompetent foreign police force, and finally, of a vindictive ex-detective. In Portugal, many viewed them as privileged foreigners who received unprecedented special treatment and manipulated the media to avoid scrutiny. These parallel realities existed simultaneously, with citizens of each country often unaware of how differently the case was perceived across borders. This divergence highlights the extraordinary power of media framing. The McCanns' ability to harness public relations expertise, including hiring former British government spokesman Clarence Mitchell as their full-time representative, demonstrated how narrative control can shape public perception. Their campaign was so effective that questioning their account became taboo in British media, even as Portuguese courts repeatedly affirmed Amaral's right to present alternative theories. The case also exposed the limitations of international police cooperation. Cultural differences, language barriers, and varying investigative protocols created friction between Portuguese and British authorities. What Portuguese police saw as standard procedure, considering multiple theories including parental involvement, was portrayed in British media as backward and cruel. Meanwhile, what British authorities viewed as appropriate assistance to citizens abroad was interpreted by some Portuguese officials as undue interference in their sovereignty. For missing children investigations worldwide, the McCann case has left a complex legacy. On one hand, it demonstrated the potential of public awareness campaigns to generate resources and maintain attention on a missing child. On the other, it revealed how wealth, connections, and media savvy can create a two-tiered system where some missing children receive exponentially more attention than others. The missing white woman syndrome, the disproportionate focus on cases involving attractive white middle-class victims, was exemplified and amplified by the McCann case. The legal precedents established through the McCann's battle with Amaral have strengthened freedom of expression protections across Europe, particularly regarding matters of public interest. The European Court of Human Rights' unanimous ruling affirmed that even painful, controversial theories about high-profile cases deserve protection when based on facts from official investigations. As for the truth about what happened to Madeleine McCann, we may never know with certainty. The German investigation into Christian Bruckner may yet yield conclusive evidence. Alternatively, the case might join the ranks of enduring mysteries that remain unsolved despite massive resources and attention. What we can say with certainty is that multiple truths exist simultaneously in this case: the pain of parents who lost their child, regardless of how it happened, the frustration of investigators who felt hampered by political and media pressure, the legitimate questions raised by evidence that doesn't neatly fit the abduction narrative, and the suffering of other families whose missing children received a fraction of the attention and resources devoted to finding Madeleine. The case reminds us that truth is rarely simple, especially when powerful interests shape the narrative. It challenges us to look beyond headlines, question dominant accounts, and recognize that justice sometimes requires uncomfortable scrutiny, even of those who appear most victimized. I hope this exploration of Gonçalo Amaral's controversial allegations has given you a more complete understanding of the complexities surrounding the Madeleine McCann case. True crime isn't just about sensational details. It's about understanding how power, perception, and media shape our understanding of justice. I'm curious, what time is it where you're watching from? Drop a comment below letting me know, and share your thoughts on this case. The conversation around Madeleine's disappearance continues to evolve, and your perspective matters. For Madeleine McCann, wherever she may be, the search for truth continues, complicated, contentious, and unresolved.